Hey, we're here to talk about RESPECT and find out what it means to me, and find out what it means to him, and find out what it means to you guys, and basically why it's important to find out what it means to everybody that we care about, right? RESPECT, obviously for those of you out there that maybe are struggle to spell, that's respect. We're going to be talking about respect just a little bit. Now, Axel, what do you think respect means?
It means treating others the way they want to be treated.
Well, there's a good point. So many of us are raised with the idea of treating others the way we'd like to be treated, which is a good rule. It's important. Let's call it the golden rule. But I like to take that a step farther and say treat others the way they like to be treated. Because the fact is, he might not like to be treated the same way I like to be treated. We all have different outlooks on that. We all have different preferences when it comes to the ways that we prefer to be treated. But at the same time, that can be really, really hard because, we got this psychological thing that's ingrained in us where it's known as the rule of reciprocity. It's where we tend to give what we get. So if I send a Christmas card, I might get a Christmas card back. It gets people, if I get a Christmas card from somebody I don't know, I'm probably going to send one back. At the same time, if someone's giving me good, high, happy energy, I'm going to start giving them good, high, happy energy back. But if someone's giving you anger and giving you frustration, then you're likely to give that back. It's a normal psychological principle, but it does get in the way of our active protection. It gets in the way of our ability to de-escalate a situation. It gets in our way of our ability to logically weigh and objectively weigh the best outcomes, and then it can often push us to make terrible decisions. That sort of reciprocity rule. So how can we get over that and manage to show respect in more stressful situations? Well, that's a tough one right there that I'm going to break down for you here today. How to manage to stay calm under pressure and to manage to use respect as a way to de-escalate tense situations and things along those lines. So, Mr. Axel, I have a question for you. Problem is, I forgot the question. So, how important do you think respect is in your relationships with other people, other kids and stuff like that?
A lot.
A lot?
Definitely a lot.
Now, why do you think it's so important?
Because,
Stuck on that one, huh?
Yeah.
No, that's all right. That's all right. So let me ask you this, because when we're younger, about your age, we tend to fall even more victim to these psychological things I'm talking about, like the rule of reciprocity. Have you ever been faced with another kid who was angry at you, mad at you for some reason, anything along those lines, yelling at you? Okay. How did you immediately feel like you should respond?
Start yelling back,
right? It's a completely natural thing. But we've all heard the saying, don't get drugged down into other person's negativity. What they say is a reflection of their character. What you say is a reflection of yours, right? And this is where but that's really hard because we have this ingrained rule of reciprocity. If you give me anger, I want to give you anger back. But that can cause us to escalate a situation and make something much worse than it really needs to be. So I like to look at respect under a different light. So respect is treating others the way they like to be treated. Okay, I'll give you that. It's a good way to show respect. But how can we get to a point of being able to do that even under tense and stressful situations?
We can write down as many positives as negatives.
I think you hit that. You're cheating me on what I'm about to say. But, yeah, that's right. We can start looking for the good. So this is something, whenever we talk about respect, when it's Respect Week through our schools, I talk often about looking for the good in things, looking for the good in others. Matter of fact, I talk about a little trick that I started using back in 2010. And I still use it to this day, though I don't write it like I used to. I do it internally now. Because over time, when you do something, it eventually becomes a habit, right? You do it enough times, it eventually becomes a habit, and you start naturally doing it. So one of the things that I've always done is when I catch myself thinking negative thoughts about a person or a thing or something someone thinks or anything along those lines, what I'll do is I'll sit down. I'm already thinking those things. So I'll sit down and write all of those negative things that I think. I ain't going to show it to nobody. I'm just going to write it on a piece of paper. And I let it all out, right? Let the emotions out on a piece of paper. Then I draw a big line under it. And then I take a deep breath. and I force myself to count how many negative things that I just wrote about that person, that thing, that situation, that argument, whatever it was. And then I force myself to write an equal amount of positive things, or things I might like, or things I learned from that person or about that situation or whatever it is. Then I crumple up the paper and throw it away. Now what does this do? Well, it slowly trains our brain that when we start thinking negatively about another person, that we should also, for every negative thing, come up with some positive thing that we like. And now this helps us break that psychological principle of the rule of reciprocity. When we meet someone who's angry and we initially feel like we should be angry, our brain will see those negative things, but it'll also bring a positive thing to light inside of us. Let me tell you a story, right? So the other day, I had to ask somebody to move a vehicle, right? I had to ask somebody to move a vehicle. And when I first asked them to move the vehicle, they were quite frustrated with me. They were quite angry about the situation. And I really wanted to be angry back. I still feel that initial feeling of I should be angry back at them, right? But in the end of it, I let this person do their anger thing, right? And then I look over and I saw it was a really nice vehicle. So instead of pushing and getting angry and yelling back, I was like, well, it's a really nice vehicle. I just hate for it to get hurt. You know, it looks like you take wonderful care of it. So basically, instead of yelling back at him and trying to insult him back, I complimented him instead. I looked for something good. I saw the negative. I didn't like the situation. I didn't like the way the person was talking to me. But I looked for something good, and I was like, well, he obviously takes really good care of his vehicle. So I started complimenting on that. And as soon as I complimented that, his entire expression changed. His entire demeanor changed. And suddenly he wanted to talk about it, because people like to talk about themselves. Suddenly he wanted to talk about the vehicle and how great it was. And then it wasn't a problem, and they moved it. This is exactly what I'm talking about, right? If you're one of those people that falls victim to the rule of reciprocity a little too often, a little too much, it's a good rule. It's an important rule. It keeps society moving forward. But if you're someone that falls victim to it often, as in if you yell at me, I yell at you back, the problem is anyone who can see beyond it, anyone who understands what's causing you to get angry and yell back, can manipulate you to do anything they want you to do. And me personally, I don't like giving that power to other people. This is why I study psychology. This is why I study behavior for active protection and things along those lines. I don't like to give that much power to someone that I'm talking to over how I feel, over how I think. We always talk about don't give other people's power. Don't give other people's opinions power over you. Well, this is how you do it, right? Now, the trick of writing things down is a very important way to start this. And it comes back to several studies have been done, and there's some fascinating studies that have been done, that the more action or commitment someone puts to an idea, the more likely they are to be stubborn to stay with that action or stay with that commitment even when they find out it was wrong. So, like for one study, for example, that I read about with this, they gave 3 groups of people 3 different ways, right? They gave them all a line, right? A line on a piece of paper, asked them to estimate its length, right? A third of the people just kept their estimate in their head, didn't tell anybody. A third of the people wrote it on a secret notebook, basically. And another third had to express it out loud, what their estimate was. Then they go back and they basically tell all of these people that some new information has come to light, and it's quite possible that their original estimate was wrong. The people who just kept their thoughts to themselves and their estimate to themselves, were 83% of them were willing to change their mind when confronted with the possibility that they may be wrong. The people who wrote down in the private notebook, only 30 some odd percent of them were willing to change their mind. And the people who had to express it publicly, only about 12% of them were willing to change their mind. These studies have been done over and over in many different ways. There's stories about how the Chinese used that against the Americans in the Korean War, which ended up actually causing riots and all kinds of things and things along those lines. I'm not going to get too deep into that story. I've been telling that story in class lately. But there's lots of stories as to how and why this works. For one reason, if we just think something and don't express it, we haven't fully committed to it yet. If we write it down, though, it's a bit of a partial commitment, right? If we've written it down, we kind of feel a little bit committed to it, right? And this is how the Chinese use that against the Americans in the Korean War. They would get them to write simple little statements. And the thing is if I handed Mr. Axel something I wrote that was really in my handwriting and it's signed, that's expressed something in particular, and he was told by someone else that I was coerced. He knows. He knew I was forced into writing it. They've done studies on this as well. Doesn't matter if the person knows the person who wrote it was forced to, they're still going to believe the person believes the statement. Because, well, how easy is it to force them to write something? This is why false confessions work really, really well and are still a rampant issue in our criminal justice system, right? And that's why we're seeing a lot of change now coming into how they're allowed to do confessions and how they're allowed to do those sort of things. But, that's the thing. Go look back. There's stats on this of people who confessed, cats are fighting, of people who confessed to a crime and then recanted it and claimed they were coerced, even if there was video proof that they were coerced, are still 86% more likely to be found guilty at trial simply because, and on the basis of, that they originally confessed to the crime in writing. That written thing has power. Words written down particularly have power, and expressed publicly even more so, right? Now, why is it that we have a tendency to want to stay with a thought that we wrote down even if we've not showed it to anybody else? Well, that has to do with the concept of consistency. See, consistency has always been taught to us since the time we were little children as a very important, a very important character trait. The ability to be consistent, the ability to seem stable, the ability to look like we know what we're doing, those sorts of things, right? Those are considered positives in our societal environment. And so we're going to tend to want to stay consistent with things that we make a commitment to, whether it's writing it down or whether it is speaking it out loud. Matter of fact, you guys have probably all heard the Weight Watchers groups and all that they use that trick where they want you to write down your weight goal and show it to as many friends as possible. That's because that studies show that it is highly, highly effective in getting people to meet their goals, especially if they express it publicly, because then they want to be consistent. They don't want to look like a flip-flopper. They don't want to look like someone who is inconsistent or unstable or changes their mind too much, because society tends to view that as someone who is confused, someone who doesn't know what they're doing, someone to not be listened to, right? But society pays attention to those that are stable and consistent, which leads to us having this psychological tendency to want to stick with something even when we find out it's wrong, because we don't want our friends and family to think it was wrong. So we'll continue to try to justify our wrong behavior, our wrong thoughts, our wrong opinions, or whatever it might be, so that we don't have to put in the work of changing our mind and dealing with the backlash of other people who suddenly see us as being inconsistent. So that's why writing these things down works. So my little trick for every time you have negative thoughts, write down all the negatives. That's not going to hurt anything because you already think them. And then write down the positives. Even if you don't show it to anybody else, over time, this changes how our brain operates to the point that when we do start feeling or thinking those negative things, we will begin to see positive things surrounding them as well. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. Axel, have you ever tried anything like that? It's not particularly easy. Like the story I was telling a minute ago about the guy asked to move his car, right? I didn't know anything about that guy, so it was hard to think of something I liked. But I used to work on cars. That was my old career. So when I realized how nice his car was kept, I have to respect that. I don't have to like the guy, but I can respect how nice he keeps his vehicle. So there's a positive thing. See what I'm saying? And then that also is a similarity between me and him. So instead of yelling back at him and keeping an argument of I say this, you say that, I changed the dynamic of the conversation by 1, letting him talk about himself, 2, complimenting him, and 3, pointing out a similarity between me and him. We both respect someone who can take care of their vehicle. See what I'm saying? And that is basically the key to the art of de-escalation. And yes, that's better than writing the negative and burning it. Absolutely, Miss Tasha. So when you write the positives down, you will start to, and over time, you won't have to write it anymore. Over time, you'll find that your brain just kind of, every time you start thinking something negative, your brain will immediately start looking for something positive to go with it, because our brains naturally look for some sort of balance, right? So once we start this practice, it takes legs of its own, and it is highly, highly effective in getting us to break those psychological feelings or those emotions that come with, if you yell at me, I want to yell back. If you insult me and make me hurt, I want to make you hurt back, right? Now, there are times that those things can be relatively ineffective, but I mean 95% of the time they're effective. Let me talk about when they can be ineffective. When you talk about someone who has, for example, like a bipolar disorder or something along those lines, where their brain dumps chemicals and they can't stop it, and it dumps all the chemicals at once and things like that, these can be a little less effective if they're in a triggered moment, like a triggered manic episode or something along those lines. It can be less effective for physiological reasons. But if it's just a psychological issue, then this really, really does help and can help us make better choices. It allows us to stay more calm and make better decisions in the situation that we're in. So, cats are going nuts. So, Axel, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Maybe a story you want to tell about where respect maybe saved you from getting in a fight or an argument, maybe about playing a game or something?
I really didn't get time to think about much things to do respect before an argument or stuff.
Yeah. Well, you're still young.
Yeah.
You got lots of time to think about such things. So you talk about respect, treating others the way they like to be treated. Now, here's the thing. How do you find out how someone might like to be treated? There's a few ways, but what's one way? While you're thinking, I'm going to read Mr. Atkins' comment. Being selfless in daily thought is key to respect. Putting others' wants, desires, expectations on level, not necessarily above ourselves. Exactly. And that's what I say. The same. Give someone else's opinion the same respect you give your own. You don't have to put it above yours. You don't have to believe it. But as long as you put things on the level playing field, it's much easier to keep perspective. And that involves being selfless, which is very difficult. And realizing that their needs are just as important as our own. Help us think about the needs of others and helping in a great way they need to be treated. That's exactly it. Reminds me of the song from a long time ago about walking a mile in another man's shoes. That's exactly right? I love that song, by the way. I think I know the one you're talking about, that blues song. It was in the 90s. Anyway, I still listen to it from time to time. It's just the name of it and the guy who sung it is not coming back to me. So back to Axel.
When they say please stop or something, you should respect their boundaries and stop when they say please stop.
Right, but how can you learn a person's boundaries? Or how can you learn about how a person likes to be treated? I got a few. You want me to start spitting some out here?
Yeah.
I'll kind of put you on the spot. One of my favorites is the most subtle way that you can learn to treat others the way they like to be treated, and that is just to pay attention to them. Pay attention to the things that they take care of. Pay attention to their actions. Let me go back to the story I said about moving the guy's vehicle. I paid attention to how well he kept up his vehicle and how nice it was, so I knew he must have put a lot of hours into that, so I knew that was something that he took pride in, which means I knew it was something that he would like pointed out and complimented. Everybody enjoys a compliment, right?
Yeah.
You act like you was to say something.
I have one
All right.
now. When you get in an argument, like I'm kind of taking one from his.
That's okay.
You should think about something positive they can do and say,
or at least something
you're really
respectable.
good at this.
Right. It doesn't even have to be something that is a positive. It can just be something that you can respect about them, right? Well, they're really fast. I may not like the guy, but he's really strong. I may not like him, but he sure does do a good job consistently with his workouts. I may not like him, but man, he sure does speak his mind and he's honest, and I got to appreciate that. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
So that's another way, is looking for things along those lines. Another way to figure out how other people like to be treated is simply by asking and observing, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying everyone should always get their way. I want to preface that right now, because I know a lot of people think that that's what I mean. I am not at all saying everyone should get their way. What I am saying is you can be respectful and respect a person for who they are and still stand your ground on something. You don't have to give everybody their way. That's not respect. That's getting steamrolled, all right? I want to make that distinction right here. But if it's getting heated, you can show a little respect to calm somebody down while still at the same time maintaining your stance and just asking for the same respect back. But if that person yells and I start yelling back, I'm not showing respect, and I'm not, therefore they're less likely to give it to me. Remember, the rule of reciprocity will continue to escalate a situation. See what I'm saying? All right, so we're talking about respect. We're talking about ways to figure out how other people like to be treated. But mostly, like I said in the earliest part of this video, it really comes down to looking for the good things, right? So Axel, we're going to do a little thing right now. I want you to think, don't tell us who it is, but I want you to think of somebody that you don't like, somebody that you don't get along with at all, somebody that you would rather not ever have to see very often in your life again. You got somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now say one nice thing about them, one thing that they're good at, one thing that you can respect about that same person. I told you, it's not easy. It's not always easy.
Mm.
Do 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 do. You can't think of a single good thing?
She's funny.
She's funny. There you go. Someone who, okay, I don't like this person and they annoy the tar out of me, but they have moments where they're funny. There you go. There's a positive thing. Guys, it doesn't have to be a big positive thing. It can be something small. I like their taste in shoes, right? Whatever it is, right? I like how they smile a lot. It could be any of those things. And yes, all this comes down to walking in another person's shoes. That's another way. One of the other ways that we can learn how to treat others the way they like to be treated. And this is another thing that I put into practice many, many years ago. Whenever I started having issues with a person or negative feelings about a person or whatever else, I would find me a quiet place, quiet room, and I'd spend 10 or 20 minutes just not moving a muscle, just breathing, eyes closed, and I would try to imagine that I was them. And I would try to imagine going through different situations that I know they've been through, or going through things that they might be going through, or I suspect they might be going through, and asking myself how I would feel, how I would react, what I would learn from that experience, and maybe if I wouldn't have turned out just like them if I'd had the similar situation, right? Or maybe I wouldn't, but this lets me put myself in someone else's shoes to at least try to understand their perspective on the situation. And really, that's not just key in respect and de-escalation, guys. That's key in, or relationships. That's also key in leadership. It's also key in learning to understand the world. Is you don't have to take on what someone else believes, but if you don't take the time to learn it, or imagine that you did, or imagine yourself in those shoes, then how can you ever respect or learn what another person's perspective is? Actually, I saw a video the other day that was General Milley, is that his name? Chairman of the Joint Chiefs currently, that he said, and I loved it. He said it on national TV, and I loved it. He made a solid argument for this, and he was talking about wanting to learn the perspective of the enemy, right? Learn the perspective that causes different things to happen. And I feel like that's really important. You don't have to believe the perspective to at least study it and learn it to understand the other person. Guys, this is the key, step one to persuasion. It is step one to persuasion. First, understand why they think the way they think. Understand their perspective. And so his point was that he had read Karl Marx. He had read, several famous communist things. Doesn't make it a communist. It just makes him interested in understanding the perspective of others. And through being able to understand the perspective of others, he's able to do his job as chairman of the Joint Chiefs better. And it's a phenomenal argument. That's it, right? Learning as much as you can about yourself and other people, that's really, really important. There's another quote from a movie that I really, really like that I'm going to throw out here now. It's from the movie Ender's Game, right? And the quote is something to the effect of, "When I understand enough about my enemy to defeat him, then I also love him." Because you learn to understand, while you're learning to understand the things you need to defeat an enemy, you also learn about their perspective and understand how to respect and have love for them as well, even though you don't agree, even though you don't take their stance, even though you're not on their side on the situation. You can still agree to have love for them when you can learn to understand the perspective that they're coming from. So yes, that is one of the best ways as well. And another way that you can learn to treat other people the way they like to be treated. Take a minute, take some time to learn their perspective. Everlast, What It's Like. Doug looked up the song. That's exactly it. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. I feel like that song was Oh, it's just a wonderful song. It's a wonderful song. Actually, you probably haven't heard that one in a long time. We'll have to listen to that one later. But yeah, so that's another way that we can learn to show respect. So Axel, earlier in this video, you said that respect means treat others the way they like to be treated. And you said that you felt like respect was a lot important, if I quote you directly, a lot important in our in our conversations with others. So let me ask you, you mentioned that if someone says stop, you can respect that and stop, but that's not necessarily just treating them the way they like to be treated, right? So what's another way that a kid your age, let's go with parents here, what's a way that you could show respect to your parents, even if you disagree on something?
Oh.
Okay, let's start easier. What's a way that you can show respect to your parents, period?
You can accept the way they act, or accept the way they eat, or
So you can use patience.
yeah.
We use patience, maybe. Accept that maybe there are certain games you might not want to play, you might want to play that maybe they don't.
Yeah.
So that would be respecting, right? Especially if you just don't push them on it. You can ask, but don't be pushy about it. It's another way of respecting it. You know, we put in a lot of work to cook that dinner. Whether you like it or not, you could
respect
respect the work that went into it and thank them anyway,
Yeah.
right? And try to eat it even if you don't like it. It's another way to show respect. And that shows respect to yourself too, because a lot of things you don't like are usually the things that are healthier for you and more important for you anyway, right? So let's say you have a disagreement with your parent. Let's say me and you disagree about what the best Nintendo Switch game is. What's a way that we can show respect in that situation?
We can
It's a ridiculous example, I know.
we can respect the games that we like,
That each other
and
like.
not argue about what the little thing.
Yeah, the little thing about it, right? So, what's your favorite game right now? Or what's been your
Minecraft.
favorite game? Minecraft. What do I think of Minecraft?
You don't really like it.
I don't really like it. It's not a game for me. I don't like playing games like that. But, do I give you a hard time for liking it?
No,
No. Do I give you a hard time for playing it?
no.
So I show respect by still paying a little bit of attention, watching when you play it, complimenting you or saying things on things you've done in the game even though I don't like it. Does that show respect, treating you the way you like to be treated?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Now how can you return that in the realms of talking about Minecraft and things along those lines? Because, you know, I don't like it so much.
Yeah.
So what's another one? What's a way you could show respect back?
I lost the words.
I'm gonna make Axel read that comment in a minute. But first, you show respect. What's a way you could show respect back when it relates to that game? Maybe if we're gonna play a game together,
Yeah.
you don't make me play Minecraft.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You stole my words.
Well, you were taking forever to find the words, so I stole them. All right, I want you to read that comment right there out loud.
Here's a way to show respect to parents when they ask you
Read it. Read it.
to do something. Obey first off, then ask if they could help you. Understand why they thought it was important enough to do it.
So if I ask you to do something and you don't want to do it, and you don't think it's that important, the way to show respect is to go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And then when you have a chance, ask me why it was important.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about that. Makes sense? Read the rest.
Oh, where was I?
You're to ask.
If they were open for suggestions for
Possibly.
possibly improving. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Have to respect authority, but never hurts to ask.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. A lot of people respect authority, though it's getting less and less. Less and less people are pulled by the influence of authority these days. But the thing is even if you have an issue with authority, I always grew up having issues with authority. I really did. But one of the lessons I learned early on in life is it's okay to have an issue with authority. But if you really want to make a change, if you really want to come to terms with that authority that are agreeable to you, then you first have to show respect to that authority. You first have to compliment them, understand why they do the way they do, understand why the rules are what they are, and then you can and let them know that you understand. And then you can subtly make suggestions out of respect to with respect to the authority, make suggestions on changes that could be better. But by complimenting the authority and showing them respect first, they are far more likely to listen to your suggestions and changes. How many guys have ever went to your boss with a suggestion or change and you just went straight into the suggestion, right? You just walked into their office, hey boss, this would be better if we did this. Probably got shut down. Chances are you got shut down, even if it was a great idea. But if you walk in and you compliment the boss and you compliment them on the situation they're at now and you show a little respect to their situation and you talk about how I know coming up with this idea and these rules must have been difficult. I know figuring out which rules to apply to this situation must have been difficult. And I respect, you for doing that, and I know how hard that was. Maybe I could help a little bit here, right? And then offer your services as help for your suggestion. You see what I'm saying? So showing respect to that authority first will get you a more likely opportunity. It puts you in a better leadership position and gives you a more likely opportunity to get them to like you, which means they're more likely to take your suggestion, right? Because you can talk about similarities between you. And the more of your suggestions they start to take, when they move up the ladder and they get promoted or they leave, who are they going to recommend to take their spot? You, because you showed interest in what they do. If you're the only person on that team that showed interest in what your boss does and tried to show them respect as well as help them and make things, when they have to leave and they have to name someone or recommend someone to put in that spot, they're more likely to recommend the one person from their team who showed them respect, showed interest in their job, found a likability thing, right? Something they can like each other about, and seem to have the best interests of the team and the company at heart. They're going to recommend them, right? So if you put yourself in that position to be that person, you don't have to always listen to the authority. Sometimes the authority is wrong. You can buck the authority, but if you do it the wrong way, you're going to end up getting stomped on, right? You got to respect the authority first, then make your suggestions and go through and do that sort of thing, right? And speaking of authority, I have another study that I'd read about that, oh my goodness, it fascinated me. And by the way, this study has been recreated dozens and dozens of times all across the country, always had the same results, right? Whether it's done with adults, children, whatever, always had the same results. And the idea is that once a person makes a commitment, like I said earlier, they're more likely to stick with the commitment, right? Unless they made that commitment by external influences and never came up with any internal reasons to stick with the commitment. So, I know that's complicated, so let me explain it by let's talk about one of the studies they did with kids. So one of the studies they did with kids, now keep in mind, this was back in the 80s? It was in the 80s. No, 70s. 80s. I can't remember. But what they did is they did this twice with groups of 25 school-age boys, about Axel's age, actually. And they went to schools and they pulled 25 boys into a room, one-on-one. There were 5 toys sitting in the room. 4 of them were junk, old bath toys, and there was one really expensive, nice battery-powered robot. Okay. Now, in the first group of boys, what they did is basically threatened a consequence if the boys played with the robot. They said, don't play with the robot, that's bad, there's going to be consequences for your actions, you'll have to sit in timeout, whatever. And then they would then the guy would leave the room and they would observe the boys. Of the 25 boys, only 1 touched the robot. Well, of course, there's consequences involved, right? So, then what he did is they left. And 6 weeks later, he sent someone else back to the school who never claimed any connection to the original thing. But they would pull the boys into a room to take a test, one at a time. While the person was grading the test, they would tell them you can play with any toy in the room. Same 5 toys were in the room. 77% of them played with the robot anyway. Right? So 6 weeks down the road, they did not stick to their commitment of not playing with the robot. Once the person who made the consequence for playing with the robot was gone, they went ahead and played with the robot. So it didn't make a lasting change in the child's psychology or decision making. It only made a temporary change. Well, I better not do it while I can get caught. And this is what I've always talked about in the past. You guys see my videos. It's all about punishment creates liars. This is what I'm talking about. So they'll go behind the back and they'll lie. But let's compare that to the next group of boys. Another group of 25 boys, the same thing was done, except this time, no punishment was offered. This time, the guy just said, now don't play with the robot. It's bad for you. It could hurt you. But no consequence was given, no punishment, right? And then left the room for a few minutes. Same thing happened as before, only 1 of the 25 boys even touched the robot, okay? Then they go back 6 weeks later. They send someone else back 6 weeks later. Same test, right? The kids take the test, they're getting graded, they can tell they can play with any toy in the room, the robot's in the room, same 5 toys in the room. This time, none of the boys touched the robot, the big, expensive, nice gift. They all played with the cheap, small gifts. When they were surveyed to ask why they didn't touch the robot, the second group of boys said, because playing with the robot is bad, it could hurt me. Right? None of them touched it. Now let's compare that again to the first group. Let's go back and talk about that first group again. They were told that it was bad to touch the robot, but because they would be in trouble, because they would face a consequence, right? And 6 weeks later, most of them played with the robot when the person who gave the potential punishment was gone. But in the second group, when they were just warned that playing with the robot could have bad things, then they didn't play with it again 6 weeks later. Now, why is that? Because the first boys who were offered a punishment, they saw the decision as being made by the authority. It was the authority that made the decision they couldn't play with the robot. So when the authority was gone, they played with the robot. The second set of boys, however, convinced themselves it was their own choice to not play with the robot because it was bad for them. No punishment involved, but they convinced themselves internally, not externally, that it was bad to play with the robot. So 6 weeks later, none of them touched the robot. Amazing, right? This has huge impacts on parenting, and this is one of the big things that we use in our classes for behavioral management and things along those lines. Punishment is not necessary. What's necessary is because that's only going to work temporarily. What's necessary is getting a child to convince themselves that it's the right thing to do. So if I say, Axel, I don't like liars. If you lie to me, you're going to get a big old whooping. Well, then he's not going to lie to me if he thinks he can get caught. But the second he thinks he's not going to get caught, probably going to lie. But if I go to him instead and I say, Axel, lying's bad. It disappoints a lot of people. And I tell him a story about a time that somebody lied and it backfired and turned out really, really bad. He's probably going to convince himself, hey, maybe I don't want to end up in that situation. So you know what? I don't want to be a liar. I don't want people to see me as someone who's not reliable. I want to make friends. I don't want to, if you're a liar, you don't make good friends. You lose more friends. I might tell him a story like that. And he's going to be more likely to convince himself that lying is bad rather than me convincing him that lying is bad using a punishment. Now, once he's decided that for himself that lying is bad, guess what? He'll police himself from there on out. Kids will police themselves from there on out on their behaviors related to lying. The trick is they have to believe they made the decision. They have to be the ones that made the decision. So being, as a parent, or when you're teaching children, being an influencer, being someone who can persuade them to make the decision on their own, is far more powerful to make a long-term commitment from that person than convincing them through punishment. Convincing them through punishment won't change their internal thoughts and characters, but getting them to convince themselves will define who they are for the rest of their lives. That's really powerful stuff, right? Now, let's talk about that with adults. Same thing, right? I'm going to talk about a different study, right? There was a different study that in the dead of summer, right, they went to this group of people in Iowa and gave them cost-effective tricks, right, to lower their heating bill. None of them did it. None of them did it. They went to a second group of homeowners in Iowa, or their cooling bill, sorry, because it was summer. They went to a second group and told them that if they followed those tricks, they would get their name in the paper as a energy conscious citizen, right? Now, when they did that, energy consumption for those people in the dead of summer, within a month, dropped 12%. And it stayed there, 12% throughout the rest of the summer. Now, they repeated this test one more time. Same size group of people. Same thing. They told them they'd put their name in the paper if they followed these tricks to conserve energy, right? Those people conserved about the same 12% of energy as before, but a month into it, they yanked it away. They sent a letter. They said, I'm sorry, we can't get your name in the paper after all. We can't do that. You can't be publicly recognized for this. They expected then that the energy consumption savings would disappear, but no. Those people went from a 12% reduction to a 40% reduction after the reward was taken away. Now that doesn't make much sense, does it? Well, there's an easy explanation for this. The explanation is, once you've decided, and this is why car dealerships will lowball offer you, right? Get you to agree verbally to a lower price and then give you time. And then by the time it comes to time to sign the contract, something else pops up that puts the price back to normal and you go ahead and take it anyway. right? They're using this same psychological trick. So let me explain how it works. Once a person makes a commitment or a decision, or feels like they're going to commit to a decision, for whatever reason they chose, doesn't matter. They choose one reason they're going to commit to the decision. Maybe it was the low price, maybe it was because they were going to get their name in the paper, right? But after that decision is made and they start taking action towards that decision, filling out the paperwork, using the cost-saving energy techniques, they begin to justify it with other decisions. They begin to change their own character to reflect, oh, look, I'm a civic-minded, energy-conserving person. Or, oh, I really do want that car for these other reasons. Look at its safety features. Look at those wheels. I like how it looks. Look at the color. What will my neighbors think, et cetera, et cetera. And they create all these new reasons for why they made the decision. So then when the initial reason they made the decision, such as getting their name in the paper or the low price, is yanked away, it's been replaced by so many other justifications for the decision that yanking the original reason they took the decision away does not change the decision, and they will double down on their effort. So going to the energy conservation thing, right? The reason they saved more energy after the original reward being taken away, because once they started it because they were going to get a reward, their name in the paper. And they were working at it. Now, while they were working at it, they were also coming up with other justifications for it. Oh, I like saving money. Oh, look at me. I'm energy conscious, and I can, oh, look, I'm civic-minded, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, I like being a play in the community type person, because they'd already started down that road. So since they made the commitment to start down that road, the prize of getting in the paper made them make a commitment. Once they started down that road, they gave more and more justifications and changed their personal characters to fit the commitment. Now, once they'd done that, there was only one external factor, right? Those are all internal reasons to do it. Oh, look at me, I'm civic-minded, I'm saving money, et cetera, et cetera. Those are internal reasons. The one external reason was the promise to get their name in the paper. Once that external reason was taken away, the only reasons they had left to stand on were the reasons they came up with internally, which made them double down their efforts on energy conservation. And it's, by the way, car dealerships, everybody's ever bought a car at a car dealership has experienced this, right? Oh, I can give you $600 more on your trade-in than Blue Book value. Awesome. I'll take the deal. All right, why don't you go ahead and drive that car for a day, come back while the paperwork ready tomorrow. Cool. You come back the next day to sign the paperwork. Now you've all showed your friends and family and whatnot, so you're kind of more committed to buying the car. Then all of a sudden it's, well, my boss says I couldn't give that price for your trade-in, so this happened. Or, well, it turns out the price I'd given you originally for the car was without air conditioning, so we have to add this $600 back in so you can get the air conditioning, or so you can get the special tires, or so you can get this other safety feature, or so you can get the airbags, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you end up paying the same price. Not the price you agreed to verbally, but the price you would have paid, the price you turned down initially, but then they offered you a better deal, so you verbally took that one and then started creating reasons in your head that you took the deal, and so when they yanked that incentive away, you have so many other reasons to stand on that you go ahead and pay the price. Because when you're talking about a multi-$1,000 purchase, what's $600 difference? And that's what you convince yourself of. Dealerships do this all the time. There's other salesmen do this kind of thing all the time. It's the tactic is called lowballing. We've all heard of lowballing. This is exactly what it is. Getting someone to commit to a low price or maybe a high trade-in value offering, and then yanking it away in the last minute after they've had time to create other reasons they made the decision, internal reasons they made the decision that weren't related to that price. They pull this constantly. That's why I hate car dealerships. I hate dealing with car dealerships. I really, really do. All right, so I guess that's probably enough. Axel, do you have anything else to add about respect or influence or things along those lines? So this is a way parents can use the method of respect to teach their kids, right? I know that, let's go back way in the past. There was a time when I used to use punishments or risks of consequences to change your behavior, but did it work?
No.
No, it never worked. It never worked. It's caused more and more risks between us, caused more and more issues between us because we disagreed. But back about 4 or 5 years ago, I changed my approach. When you were about 5, I changed my approach. And I started, instead of telling you you would be in trouble for doing this, I started telling you, you don't want to do this, let me tell you a story why. It changed everything, didn't it? Mm-hmm. Because now I'm not the one making the decision for you. See, that's the thing. People respect authority, they just don't respect an authority that is making a decision for them. But if that authority is good at influencing, and can make that person think they made the decision for themselves by just explaining the merits of why it's bad, why it needs done, et cetera, what can happen if we don't. Well, if we don't take the trash out regular, we're going to track ants and rats and all kinds of nasty stuff in here. That's not cool. Well, if we don't sweep the floor, we're also going to have bug problems. Well, if we don't clean our room, then your room's going to get infested with fleas and mice and ticks and whatever else, right? Now, that kind of consequence might make you to decide different. Ooh, I don't want that, so I think I'm just going to decide to keep my room clean. Instead of, if you don't clean your room, you're going to be grounded, which will make you resent the authority. By an authority offering a punishment, it makes people resent the authority. By getting the person to decide that this is the right thing to do on their own, they will not resent the authority, they will respect the authority from there on forward. I've seen this work firsthand with me and him. I see it work firsthand with the way we deal with kids at the school, with the way we deal with tigers at the school, with the way parents at our studio have adjusted the ways that they do things with their kids and then been like, oh, it's amazing. The kid's a whole different kid. Yeah, exactly. Forget the punishments. Forget the punishments. Talk about consequences. What are the consequences if you don't do it? What are the consequences if you do lie and get caught? What are the consequences? If you give them the horror stories of the consequences, the bad things that can happen, they'll make the decision for themselves, and you can trust most kids to make the right decision. Just give them the consequences, not the punishments. Right? What's the consequence if we don't wash the dishes?
Our house would start smelling really, really
It
bad.
stinks! And it attracts
Flies, fleas,
ants. Yeah,
ants.
all kinds of stuff. By giving him that consequence, he is much more likely to help us keep up with washing the dishes, aren't you? But what if I just said, if you don't wash the dishes every couple of days, then you're going to be grounded and no electronics. You're probably more likely to want to be rebellious. I'm never washing the dishes. There's my electronics and exerting that power over me, blah, 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 right? Doesn't work. It doesn't work. But if I tell him why the dishes need washed, he's going to be like, oh, I noticed that smell. I better wash the dishes before the ants show up. I don't want the ants all through my food.
Yeah.
Before the roaches come in.
I'm still in war with ants.
Yeah, he's in a bit of a war with ants. Me, I don't like roaches. I've lived in too many roach-infested apartments and stuff around the city. All right, so we've been on here plenty long enough. There's a couple of comments we didn't get to. That's why parables and fables are effective. That's exactly why parables and fables are effective, and why parables and fables from hundreds and thousands of years ago are still prevalent and known and taught today. That's exactly why they're effective. It helps people to envision themselves in the situations and the repercussions of those actions. That's exactly right. Done in the way to relate. Yeah, and on top of that, you guys got to check this out. You see this? It's a ball. It's a blue, squishy, smooth ball. We just got these yesterday. They're really, really cool. So we're going to be out at I forgot what they're calling it this year. The Independence Day Festival in Newcastle, the one they do at Veterans Park. I forgot what their title is of it this year. The fireworks show. But we're going to have a booth out there. We do it every year. We're going to be playing some awesome games with the kids. I think we have a list of like 5 different games we're going to play. We have several cool prizes, including these, right? These little squish stress balls. We'll probably have our usual backpacks. We have some $100 gift cards. We have a few hats and shirts to give out, but not many. When those are gone, they're gone. We have some free birthday parties to give out. We have all kinds of other stuff that we're going to be giving away at that event. Come out and have some fun. Just play a game with us, right? We have a game where we try to see how many dice we can stack on our finger before they fall. I can't even remember the other games we're going to play this year. I'm kind of drawing a blank right now. Do you remember? You did them the other day on Saturday. You guys were playing them. Oh, the jump game. How many times can you jump in 20, 30 seconds? How many times can you jump in?
Flag drop.
Flag drop. Can you catch, if you drop 5 flags, each with a prize on it, and you're shown the prize you want, but all are dropped at the same time, you got to try to catch that one out of the group to win your prize. Stuff like that, right? Those are pretty cool. What was another one we were doing? Can't remember now. Board breaks. We always do some plastic board breaks with the rebreak boards and stuff like that. All right, but come see us out there. It's going to be this Saturday the 3rd. Is that this Saturday? That is this Saturday. This Saturday the 3rd. Show you a number with the belt. Oh, yeah. The belt game, the belt focus game. That's always one of my favorites, where you put two belts on the table and you say, I'm going to show you a number, and all I want you to do is guess it. And when you guess it, come whisper in my ear how you knew the answer. Because the goal of the game is not just to get the number right. The goal of the game is to know how you got the number right, because it involves awareness and focus. Yeah, that's a really fun game. I like to do it with large groups of people. The more the people, the less likely they are to pick up on the trick. It's pretty funny. But nowadays, a lot more people have started to see it, so I use it a little bit less. But I think we're going to bring that back for this one as well. So, all right, so we're going to go ahead and jump off here. Thank you for the comments and shares. We really, really appreciate it. Actually, later this week, we're going to be asking you for some reviews, recommendations, or your own special interest stories and things along those lines for making a new page on our website that's really, really cool. It's called the Community Speaks page, and it's going to be a page where people can just, where we post stories that people share with us about their experiences with us at Peaceful Warriors in our studio and things like that. If you want to see what it looks like, I'll go ahead and put that in the comments so y'all can see what we've got so far. Now, it's nowhere near finished, right? I've only got like 24 stories in it, I think, and I still have, you know, another 40 or 50 to put in it to get it up to date. And then after that, we will be adding more stories to it as anyone who wants to share them. Oh, there it is, right there. I want to view that page and copy that. There we go. Trying to do two things at once never works well for me. There we go, and there's the link to the new Community Speaks page, so you can check it out for yourself. See if one of your stories is on there, and where it's just really cool. It's a really cool thing to kind of talk about things the community talks about with us. So until we see you guys again.
Be the best.
Wait. What's respect me?
Treating others the way they want to be treated.
And what's step one to learning to show respect?
Oh, looking with their focusing.
No, looking for. It was a hint, not the answer. Looking for the good.
The good.
Looking for the good in others. Looking for the good in things. Very good. So until we see you guys again, be the best teammate you can be.
Be the best
at being you.